Let's talk today bubbles, financial bubbles. How do they come about? How do they grow? And what do you do when you see one? So how does a bubble form? I mean, first of all, what you do is you have the germ of truth. Let's say you find a coffee bean. You're the first person to find coffee beans. You're in phase one. You're the person who's starting the whole thing off. And off you go and you try and sell this fantastic idea of coffee shops. Not many people listen. It takes quite a long time to get going. Then secondly, what you do is you get the second phase where some people start believing you, some people start investing in you, and it starts to grow. And that's all very well. But it's really the third phase that creates the madness of crowds. And that's where it goes viral. Everyone said, this is the new thing. It's a new paradigm. This is absolutely amazing. And it goes absolutely parabolic. At this stage, the price is well beyond any true value. And then the fourth phase, you get the crash. A good example of a bubble is actually 1720, the South Sea bubble. Well, you can look it up if you're that interested. But what I want to say is that one of the greatest thinkers, one of the greatest minds in all of humankind, Sir Isaac Newton, he got caught. He bought it at 200, sold it at 400, watched his friends get rich as it kept going up, bought it again at 700, then it collapsed and he lost all his money. He actually said, I can calculate the motion of heavenly bodies, but not the madness of people. So what do you do if you see a bubble? Well, if you see the bubble early on, what you do is you buy it. You don't say, oh, it's a bubble, it's going to collapse. It's going to get bigger and more vast than you ever thought possible. It's actually when you yourself start to believe that this bubble is real that it becomes problematic. Now, there are two types of bubbles, those that leave residual value, that the railroad bubbles, for example, that was the financial share price, went up massively, collapsed, but it actually left a railway system behind. And the second kind of bubble, the one we worry more about, and that's really the tulip type bubble or tulip mania, because the word bubble hadn't really been invented, where actually after it collapses, there's no residual value. And I think, quite frankly, that's why people are much more worried about Bitcoin than they are about, say, for example, technology. And that's because the one has residual value and the other doesn't. I mean, the best definition I've heard of Bitcoin is if I could leave my diesel polluting car on all night and it could solve Sudoku puzzles, and with the proceeds I could buy drugs. That is Bitcoin, and there is no residual value. Sure, blockchain has value, but Bitcoin has no residual value, and that's why we worry about it. But is the S&P and is the technology sector in a bubble? Well, I doubt it is at the moment, and there are several reasons why. One of them is that we haven't really seen the mania that comes with the price action of a bubble. Of course, the best way to know there was a bubble is after it's popped, but that's no use to anybody at all. So what do? We often look at valuations to see whether there's been a bubble or we're in a bubble. And now many people have pointed out to what is called the Case-Shiller PE of the S&P, and that is at the highs we saw really in the 1920s before the crash, before the NASDAQ crash, which we'll talk a little bit more about, and that is definitely giving a warning signal. So here I want to demonstrate to you how towards the end of the bubble the move goes absolutely parabolic, and this I do not believe we've seen. No, we haven't seen it in equities at least, except for some of the smaller companies, and that is giving some type of signal. So basically the NASDAQ bubble lasted 60 months or 5 years, and it took 4.5 years for half of that move to take place. And my point being, in the last 6 months, you saw the rest of the move, that half the move took place in the last 6 months. And that's when everyone goes absolutely crazy. And that we certainly have not seen. So in the example of the NASDAQ, we saw 50% of the move in 10% of the time. And prices got way beyond any economic reality. And eventually the bubble burst. Yes, prices are elevated. Yes, the equity market is expensive. What could cause it to come down, what could prick it, is obviously the Fed raising rates. But if you watch the video on average inflation targeting, this is unlikely for quite a while to come. But if you start seeing an exponential or parabolic rise in markets from here, I'd get very, very concerned.